Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Hobby Hotline. My name is John Newman from Sports Card Nation, Hobby Quick Hits, probably a few other shows I forgot about, but glad to be back. We are two guest hosts along with me today. I'll go in order they appear on my screen. We got Jeff Dinson, Deafness 45, does a ton of YouTube content creation. Great guy. Glad to have him. I believe this is your first time on the program. So he's making his Hobby Hotline debut. And to his right, at least on my screen, not making his Hobby Hotline debut. Glad to have him as always. Back again, Dr. James Beckett. Welcome.
Morning.
Thanks,
All
John.
right. Good morning. So, I mean, one of the first things I kind of want to talk about with just announced, I heard about it, is the 2022 National is going from Cleveland to Atlantic City. The convention center in Cleveland was not available any longer. And so the folks at the National had to, go to Plan B. I heard they did try to keep it in Cleveland. We're looking for an alternate venue. Apparently, no such luck in that department. And so Atlantic City's getting their National 2 years after they were supposed to get it this year. We all know why that didn't happen. I'll go to Dr. Jim first on this one. Thoughts on that. And I know a lot of people don't like Atlantic City and kind of wanted it. I heard a lot of people say just do a Chicago again or just go Chicago permanently. Kind of your thoughts on this announcement.
Well, if it's Chicago permanently, some people would say that's not a national. That's just a huge Chicago show. But,
yeah,
I'd love to. I mean, I'm a big one for rotating it around. I think Chicago is the best single location. Cleveland was an excellent location, partly because of not because of the facility, because the facility wasn't a great facility, but it was huge, and there was ample parking and all that stuff. But it was closer to the East Coast. I think there's too much hobby strength on the East Coast to ignore the East Coast. So to put Atlantic City back in, that's in deference to all the people on the East Coast, and I want them to come to the National. So I'm not against it. It's not my favorite location, but apparently it's the one on the East Coast that they can more easily work with.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just glad, at this point, we lost the National this year. I'm just glad we're talking about having them. And now I'm biased. I'm on the East Coast, so Atlantic City's driving distance for me. So it saves me a plane ticket. I can bring more stuff in my vehicle. So from a personal point of view, for me, I don't have an issue with it. Works out better. I was planning to go to before the pandemic hit. I had all my itinerary set and reservations and all that. And my wife was even going, and she was just going to make a vacation out of it. My son was going to go, and unfortunately that didn't occur. But I'm biased where it works better for me. But I'll go pretty much. I'm not opposed to. I like Dr. Jim said. I'd like to see it. So, if I'm on the West Coast, I'm an East Coaster. But if I was a California guy, I'd like it to be a little bit closer to me. I mean, I don't think that's asking for a lot. I got to think there's somewhere that way. I'm even with everything where you are, Dr. Jim, and all the hobby hotbed of Texas and Dallas. I don't even know why every once in a while, they can't have one in that area too. I mean, that makes perfect sense. So, Ziggy No says Denver. I've never been to Denver, so I'd be all right with that one too. But Jeff, you go every year too, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Well, yeah. So last year was my first year. I went to Chicago, and for me, that was just a hop, skip, and a drive. It was about a 6-7 hour drive. Load up the boys and head to Chicago, right? But I feel the same way. It needs to be. I mean, they need to move it around. You're not only because not everybody can travel. Not everybody has the luxury to fly out and book hotels, fly across the country, wherever they're located. So I think geographically, moving it around, and that's also going to continue to help grow the hobby, right? You have to continue to gain more interest. You have to bring more interest in. How are you going to really get people excited? Well, if you haven't been to a national, or you have been to a national, once you step foot into that national and you got 30,000 plus people walking through the front doors, it becomes like an eye opener, and you're like, wow, this hobby really is this big. You start seeing thousands beyond thousands of vendors. And if you keep it stuck in one place like Chicago, which at the end of the day, I wouldn't mind because it's a 6-7 hour drive, I'm all right with moving around, and I'm all right with giving that ability to people that live more local. You heard about people with Atlantic City getting shut down this year. The people around Atlantic City, that can't travel or can't get there, they're excited to get there and do that. So, yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, moving it around is the right thing to do, and not keeping it stuck at one central location every single year. So,
yeah, I mean, this hobby is worldwide. I mean, obviously, we're going to talk about the continental United States, but yeah, I mean, everyone in every state, there's collectors and dealers in every state. I'm not saying we have a national in every state, and it's like Haley's comment, and each state gets one every 48 years. But I'd like to see it at least, we got 4 time zones. I'd like to see us hit, I'd like to see it. I say us like I'm involved. I'd like to see it, the national, get in every time zone, at least, that way, it wherever. If it's in Oregon, if it's in Portland, at least Californians can, I mean, it's still a trip, but maybe not as bad as going to Atlantic City from California. And so I love to see that. Here's a comment from Brody. I got to put this on the screen. Brody wants it to go to Vegas, which is where the industry summit is. And he says cards and gambling. I guess my question to Brody is, what do you know about gambling, Brody? And then teach me everything you know. But yeah, I'd like to see it. I'd like to see it move around. We're getting a lot of comments in the chat. Kansas City, hey, how about west of the Mississippi? 3B Herman says Atlanta, which I think is a great city. I saw. Let me find the comment. Orlando. Orlando in that time of year is a great destination. I think. I wonder if the issue there is just the accommodations. I mean, Orlando's already a huge tourist town, and maybe they just can't get enough hotels to accommodate what they need to accommodate. At this point, with me, I'll travel. I mean, I like when it's going to be in Atlantic City or somewhere. I'm a New York City kid, so I'm gonna hype them up and say, hey, it's the mecca of the world. Why can't we have it in New York City? But again, there's logistics, traffic, hotel accommodations. It's not just as easy as saying, okay, we're here next year. There's a lot, obviously most know, that goes into it. And that we got a caller. I'm going to bring him on. He's a regular on this show, Mr. James Hummel. Welcome, James.
Morning, boys. How are you?
Morning.
That's some shirt you got on there, Mr. Beckett.
It's completely green.
Yeah, I can tell.
My background from my Zoom calls, and you can't show it on StreamYard except with a green screen. I'm apparently wearing a green screen.
Apparently, it's hey, listen, really it's fitting.
He just wants to show off his PC.
Yeah.
Two birds with one stone.
Yeah. I'd love to see it in Chicago every year. Someone that lives in Toronto, again, for me, it's an 8-hour drive. Flying out of Toronto to the U.S. is super expensive. So anything within driving distance for me would be great. Vegas would be great, obviously, but then I got to fly, and sure, there's cheap vacations in Vegas, right? But for me, anything within driving distance from Toronto would be perfect. So. Yeah.
So how far is Atlantic City from Toronto for you?
So what? New York is – how long is New York? New York is about 10 hours, and what? Atlantic City's how far?
About an hour and a half.
Yeah, so 11 hours. Yeah. So it would be a hike. You could do it in
Yeah.
one day, right? So
Yeah. Now, obviously, you guys have the Toronto Expo. I went
Yes.
last year for my first time there. You
Yeah.
know, even that's a topic. What about? I'm not saying all the time, but even having the national across the border, or maybe having here, James, have two nationals in
Yeah.
1 year. Have an
Yeah.
American one and a Canadian one.
Yeah.
You know, maybe not every year. Maybe you do it like almost like the Olympics every 4 years. We have a national in a part of Canada, and obviously Canada is, I believe, has 4 time zones as well, and you can kind of move each time you're back there. 5. All right.
Yeah.
See what,
we're at
see, I
Fractional
learned.
Special.
Yeah, I learned something. And well, you have each time it's back in Canada, maybe you hit one of those 5 time zone areas. That way, everyone in Canada's got a chance, because I got to think you might make the trip, but there's probably others that would like to, and just with logistics and finances, it's just not in the cards, pun intended.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see. I'm one of those guys. The hobby is worldwide. I like to see as many people can be accommodated for their dedication in the hobby to begin with. So
I think it would be great to have such a, again, the Toronto Expo is a good size expo, right? Me being a baseball guy, it's mostly hockey, right? So I kind of go to the 4 or 5 booths that are at the Toronto Expo that have baseball and such. But I think a lot of Americans would have challenges coming up to Canada to do a big show because of, border crossings, duties, customs, right? They're going to be asked, well, where are you going? Oh, we're going to a card show. Are you going to sell? Okay, well, then you got to start collecting taxes, right? So it's as great as it would be, it would be a challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hey, listen, I went to the Toronto. That's a card show. So, I mean, it's not – you're right. It is going to be tricky, but I don't think it'd be impossible. All right, we got another caller. Thanks, James. Do you have anything else?
Actually, yeah, I do. And so it was a topic that I wanted to bring up. The boys on Mojo this past week were talking about customer service, and actually, this is where I was talking in the chat with Jeremy to say, "Hey, Jeremy, come on, I'd like to get his opinion on this."
Well, let me bring him. Let me see. Let me bring him on. We're gonna go 5 wide here.
Sure.
Welcome, Jeremy Lee. Also from Canada. We're Americans are still winning right here, 3-2.
We're taking over, Jeremy.
Let's do it.
But it's getting closer. But yeah, go ahead, James. Finish.
Yeah. So the boys from Mojo Break were talking about it earlier this week. They were ragging on some of the people that were complaining to Tops about a damaged box, and they got on about customer service with these with all the big 3, Tops, Panini, and Upper Deck. And it really got me thinking because I had a problem this week. Like I raised an issue with Upper Deck earlier this week. So again, you guys know me as the Tops Now guy, and I've started to get into game dated cards, right?
Yeah.
And I've also gotten into Panini instant cards too. So the problem I have with Upper Deck is with these game data cards, they're the e-packs, right? So they're the virtual packs, but you could eventually transfer them to physical cards. Okay. So the process, as I understand it, is you transfer them about 3 or 4 weeks after you open the packs, and then they go to ComC, who fulfills the shipping and putting them into top loaders. Okay, granted, ComC's got their own issues with getting cards out right now, but when I transferred the more recent cards like a week ago, it told me I wasn't going to get my physical cards until February. So from the time that I purchased them to the time that I figure I'll have them in hand is 6 months, right? Like, from a customer service perspective, again,
sounds like grading to me.
Yeah, true, right? But from a customer service perspective for Upper Deck, 6 months is ridiculous, right? Like, even with Tops, granted with COVID and Project 2020, they've been taking their time to get stuff out, but obviously because of volume. But I'm still getting cards in Canada like 4 or 5 weeks after I order them. 6 months is a huge time to wait for a physical card.
Yeah, I mean, Upper Deck, I'm gonna say it's my opinion, but I think it's shared by a lot of people in the hobby. To me, they have the best customer service. You know, you talk about the big three. I think we're ranking them. If I'm ranking them customer service wise, Upper Deck is definitely number one in my book. So I'll give them. I don't want to say I'll give them a pass. I mean, we all got a commitment and do good business, but I'm assuming there's a reason for that kind of length. I mean, Upper Decks is hockey, you know what I mean? So it's not like they're not familiar with the Canada landscape and the hobby landscape there. So I don't know, specifically, what's going on there. We have Jeremy Lee from Sports Cards Live. Welcome this morning.
Yeah, and that's why I was chatting with Jeremy and saying, hey, Jeremy, we'd like to get your perspective, because it was actually what, I went back and watched the episode that you had with Chris. I can't remember his last name, from Upper Deck. And I tweeted Upper Deck and I said, hey guys, like 6 months, is this really reasonable? And I tagged Chris in it, and Chris responded. And I give him kudos for responding and reaching out. His excuse was, his reason was because of the delays at ComC. And I said, but shouldn't you guys get priority, right? Like if this is the model that you have set up for your e-pack, should you not get priority and get those cards into the collector's hands sooner rather than later?
I mean, I don't know if I agree that they should get priority over ComC's direct customers, but I can understand why Upper Deck customers would want that and why Upper Deck would want that, but I don't know that they, just as a rule, should get that. I don't know what their agreement entails. One thing I'll say though about delays, and it's hobby wide, not just ComC for me. And I think I'm just a little bit more forgiving than most in that I am. Well, two things. First of all, I'm a little bit more patient, I think, than most people, and I'm more forgiving because I understand that the world is going through these crazy times right now, unprecedented in our lifetime, and especially with the global economy and shipping, it's really put a strain on that. So I'm okay with it, but I will say, as far as ComC goes, if you choose their more expensive shipping option, you will get it quicker. And I just got this package. This came 2 days ago, and I ordered it 2 weeks ago, so it took 2 weeks, but I did choose the most expensive shipping option because I did want to get them. So from that perspective, it was no problem, and I'm quite pleased. They exceeded my expectations considering the state of the world right now, but I did pay a premium to get it to me. So those are my thoughts on it. I mean, if you're looking for if you need cards to arrive in your to arrive in time for you to move them, and you're afraid that the market's going to move before they arrive, that I can see that being an issue for people who are taking shipment. But if you're ordering cards for your personal collection, I would encourage people to be more patient, especially if you don't need to, if they're for your personal, you don't need to flip them quick before something changes.
No, and it's a good perspective. I think it, I come back to the customer service portion, right? And Topps is a perfect example of this. Even before COVID, their customer service was horrible, right? And even now, I'm hearing horror stories of people calling and they're on hold for an hour and a half. So from what I know of their customer service department, because I've talked to quite a few people, and actually they even showed it, there's only like 8 people in their customer service department. They're only taking phone calls 4 days a week. Friday, they work Friday, from what I understand, but all they do on Friday is respond to emails. If Topps wants to move to more of an online product offering, they need to double, if not triple, their customer service department, because it's not sustainable. Like their volume is just going to increase. Well, and we've seen it with Project 2020, right? They're 100,000 cards. They're going to get 4 or 5 times the volume of customer service inquiries. Like they really need to beef it up. So that's why I'm hoping Topps, Upper Deck, and Panini are listening to this and understand it. Like if you're going to move that way, you need to beef up your customer service.
Yeah, and Jeremy, piggybacking off what he said, he made a great point. We are in a pandemic. That's a game change. That's a game changer. But on the same side, there's two sides of that coin. I think some of the companies, whoever you want to tag them as, are also using that sort of as a crutch. Like, hey, like you said, some of that was happening pre-pandemic too. And then when hopefully when we're on the other side of COVID-19, and that's not an excuse anymore, they're definitely going to have to improve in those departments. And go ahead, Jeremy.
I just want to, when we say that another entity might be using something as a crutch, I think that that's a big leap, because we don't really know what's going on behind the scenes. And I say that from my own professional world. We, in the company I work for, we were accused of that, as using COVID as a crutch, and we weren't. We had other issues that caused a delay. And I read it in our investor groups on Facebook, and I saw, they're using it as a crutch to issue their financials. Well, no, that's not what happened, but people come to these conclusions because they don't have all the information. So while I understand the perception, John, I caution people from saying that, because we just don't know what other challenges they're having. COVID isn't the only challenge. And that said, what I've heard is that it's really hard to hire people right now. It just is. For whatever reason, it's hard to hire people. So, but again, there could be other mitigating factors that exist that we just don't know about. We couldn't even conceive them in our brains. And we were told
you're right.
About.
You're right, Jeremy. And I'm not going to say who, because I can't. But I know there's two companies that I've talked to people they've had employees come down with the virus, and obviously you've got a mandatory shutdown, and so that's going to for sure factor into production and what you're doing when everyone basically has to leave the building and then work from home or if that. So yeah, you're right. Probably a little unfair on my part, and I apologize. I think I'm meaning more from piggybacking what James said, is like it was kind of going bad. Customer service was happening before, and then it just continued in, and then it's easier to say, well, now we're dealing with this,
Yeah, it's certainly amplified in today's circumstances, for sure. And by me saying that, I'm not. They might be. They might be using it as a crutch. I'm not saying they're not. I'm just saying they might not be, and we have to consider that too.
But you know what? And you make a good point, Jeremy. And they shouldn't be using it as a crutch. But what they have the opportunity to do, and like you and I work for a big bank here in Canada, and what really shows the success of a company is if they're able to evolve quickly, right? Like the bank that I work for, we flipped on a dime, right? Okay, yes, we have the infrastructure, we have the size to be able to do it, but really any company that is willing to kind of think outside the box and is willing to take on a challenge or wants to be at the forefront of the industry, they should be able to change on a dime, right? Like my bank, we started to throw branch people, which kind of makes no sense, but we started to throw branch people working from home, right? And like 95% of our staffing are all working from home, and we were able to do that quickly, and we're being successful in doing it. I look at someone like Tops, again, coming back to customer service, even if COVID didn't happen, let's say, right? And Project 2020, as an example, was the huge success that they had. They had a ton more money coming in. Why not hire out contractors to be able to handle customer service, or go to one of these companies that all they do is phone service, right? There's tons of companies out there that do customer service for other companies, right? Like what's the old the car company where you can press the button, you get roadside assistance service or whatever. What was the name of that? I can't remember.
OnStar.
Thank you, OnStar. And that was primarily what a GM product or a Ford product or something like that. They completely outsourced that. There was a company in east of Toronto here in Oshawa. They had no relation to Oshawa or to GM or Ford rather. They were doing it as a third party service, right? there's opportunities here for the car companies to be able to do things like that.
Yeah, I know. I'm guilty of saying this myself too, James. Is especially on the grading front. I'll just hire more graders, and you
Right? Yeah,
mentioned
that's
hire.
yeah.
I think people, companies, and again, I don't want to speak for them. It's just my opinion. They, yes, they could. Business is good right now in the hobby. They could hire more people. I think they're thinking past that. What if we do have a slowdown or a market correction or business dies down a little bit, and then we have to, in turn, we have too much staff, and so I think they're thinking even past today.
Yeah.
Maybe that influences hiring decisions, and
Yep.
I'd like to see more people hired. It's good for the economy, gets people to work. So I'm not opposed to that. I'm just kind of putting myself in their position and maybe why that doesn't occur necessarily.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, and that's why they've got to start thinking outside the box, right? Like a contractor kind of scenario, right?
Yeah, they could bring it, James, like you're saying, bring in temporary help, and then John, you're concerned about if there is a dip or the industry doesn't hold these levels, then there's no problem. And you don't have to lay people off. You're just ending contracts, which is a lot easier to do when you're using temporary staff. So that could be an option.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Dr. Beckett, Jeff, anything it's been the three of us.
Yeah, I think the big thing, like, James and Jeremy are speaking on, as far as as somebody who actually on my day job has worked for myself, basically, I'm contracted. I'm a sales broker, but I think a lot of these companies just have a hard time. Not all of them, but I think a lot of companies have a hard time, instilling enough trust in having people. If you're going to have people work at their house, right? Somewhere where they can't be seen, really, the accountability obviously is still there, right? If they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, they're going to get fired. But taking the time to hire on people, to train people, and then entrust that these people are actually going to clock in at home and work when they're supposed to and answer the phones when the phones ring. I mean, I'm not saying everybody's lazy, but it does take a certain kind of individual to be able to keep yourself grounded when you're working at home and not veer off and do something else or get caught up in something else or have distractions from home if you have kids at the house or something,
or buying cards or something like that, right?
So, yeah, but at the end of the day, I mean, I think that's hiring and having people work from home, like you said, your bank did, which kudos to them, and them evolving and changing fast. I think that's a valid point to do. I think it's just hard for companies to instill the trust of giving that to their employees to not be able to see them, every minute or every hour that they're supposed to be working where they're at home, So that's all I got.
All right, James, Jeremy, I'll talk to you actually later.
Sounds.
Wait.
Sorry if I may, John. Just back to the national and
go ahead.
So, we talk about where we'd like it to be, all over the country and all that. And I had a conversation with somebody a couple of years ago. I don't remember who it was, but they knew a little bit more about what goes into planning the expo and the national. And they said that, it's not as easy as just picking a city and we're going to go there. These things, it requires 2 years lead time. Not every city actually has a convention center that is conducive to the national, believe it or not. And I don't remember the details, but I was wondering if Jim, maybe you have any more insight into why it is so challenging to find a venue or a city that has an appropriate venue for the national. Because again, people think it's just so easy to go into a city and line up a place and have the event. Are there mitigating factors that are out there that people just don't know about?
Let me answer your question, Jeremy. Excellent question. You're a great questioner, as I've experienced on your show. But let me tie both those things together, the customer service and the national. And the way they go together is that the people running these things are not trying to do a bad job. They want to do a good job. But in both cases, there are constraints, there are stakeholders, there are constituencies. And in the case of customers, first of all, with the national, there's complicated ownership, many stakeholders, and then as you said, there are these other constraints of we have to lock in hotel rooms or know that we have a certain space. And so I think we would take more than all the rest of the time to talk about fixing the national or making it better in the sense that we're talking about it, more representative around the country. So let me table that for just a minute. On the customer service, which I wanted to speak to, is that I come at it as an entrepreneur, and basically all customers want customer service to be maximized, but the boss, the owner, the company doesn't want to maximize customer service. They want to optimize customer service. If Tops or Panini or Upper Deck had 10-second waiting times instead of 90-minute waiting times, it would encourage a lot more calls, not all of which are necessary or productive. And so by having long wait times, yes, they are discouraging people from even calling. If the wait times were less, more people would call. Maybe they don't want that. Yep. And maybe that's a rational response. I know we had more than 10 people in customer service at the peak of our company, and we were taking calls all the time. But, because they're so ready and available, we got lots of calls, and not all the calls were productive to our business, or certainly not adding to the bottom line. Some were. We tried to upsell them sometimes, but like I said, don't be thinking that the best customer service is instant customer service, because sometimes that can be very unprofitable and encourage bad habits in your customers. Tops, if they were 10-second waiting time, you'd be calling up for everything.
It's a very good perspective, Jim. Yeah, absolutely.
Minutes is outrageous.
Yeah, but the only thing I will say to that, and this is something that I don't know who said it to me years ago, is I think companies have to understand who their competition is, or perceived competition is. Okay. So what I mean by that is, like, I look at Disney as the perfect example. Okay. And we all know Disney has the ultimate customer experience, guest experience. Okay. And anybody that has had an interaction with the Disney company, either in their parks or their stores, they're going to see, hey, this was a great experience. This is, this is the best customer experience I've ever had. Well, now when they go to start to deal with really any company, their expectation is that high now, right? And I think that's what companies have to realize, is that, Tops is not just competing with Panini and Upper Deck in terms of cards, but when it comes to customer service, they are competing with Disney. They are competing with airlines. They're competing with hotels. And I think that kind of thought process has to happen with all companies. Like, I know my own bank years ago, they had a whole swath of executives go and do training with Disney about customer experience or customer service, because they realized at that point, yeah, we're competing with these guys for customer service. So we've got to step up our game.
Yeah.
Absolutely right, James. But again, in the maximal view of competition, the hobby is competing with everything for the attention and dollars of the North American public. But in the narrow sense, it's not the card companies as much as it's the licensors. It's when they say we've got one licensee, for baseball or football or basketball or hockey, then there is no race between the competitors. Yeah. It's one. And so if customer service, like I said, so they're optimizing their customer service to not make it great. They apparently feel that making it great is not cost effective for them.
But and I understand that, right?
Sorry, but just jump in. Yeah. Jim, you said that the hobby's competing with all these other industries, and it's true, and it's winning. The hobby's winning right now. and because it's winning, it's putting this unforeseen pressure on all the resources in the hobby, all the the commercial entities in the hobby. So it's widespread, right? It's not just ComC, it's not just Upper Deck, Tops, Panini, it's the grading companies, it's everything. It's even the U.S. Postal Service and the Canadian Postal Service. It's every single player in the hobby.
Even the secondary market, right? Like eBay. I think I heard someone say not too long ago that cards have the card portion of eBay has grown and is one of the larger portions of the eBay market, right?
It's the biggest category, apparently.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, just a radical thought. If you were in an industry, in a business that had customers that had all kinds of new customers coming all the time, and you said, well, we can't handle all these customers, but wow, this is great. Wouldn't it be great to just get rid of the customers that are complainers? I mean, I'm being facetious, but they've got more customers than they know what to do with it. And when the customers that are not, as John has pointed out, that there's some people that come into the hobby, they don't know what they're doing. If they ask a bunch of questions to the wrong people, they're discouraged. Like we don't need you. If you're going to ask a lot of questions, we're not going to answer. I'm being facetious, but there's some point to that. The hobby is so strong that just tough it out.
Well, this I come back to my comment that I made earlier that these companies need to shift their thinking, right? Like Tops, Upper Deck, Panini, eBay, PSA, they all need to start changing their thought process and how they run their companies. To your point, Mr. Beckett, is that there's all these new customers that are coming in. There's all these new collectors that are coming in that have completely set a different set of expectations.
And they're helping them to see that these expectations on customer service need to be low.
Unfortunately, but here again, I come back to here's an opportunity for these companies to evolve, right?
And Ziggy nails it right there. It's business, guys. It's business. These companies have shareholders and owners and other stakeholders, like Jim said earlier. They're optimizing customer service is exactly what they should be doing for their bottom line. I think we're a finicky customer base, and that's okay. We're putting big money into this stuff, so we've bought the right to be finicky to some extent. But I completely hear what Jim says about
guys. Again, we had an extensive customer service. Do you know how many of the customer service we called that called us were yes or no questions? 0%. Okay.
Yeah.
They all want to discuss something. They wanted to tell us how to do our business. It was an extended call, and the training for that, you've got to be polite, but it takes a long time, and it's hard to train because they're coming up with these scenarios that sound good to them, but wouldn't work for our company. And again, I'm ancient history now, but again, my guess is these customer service calls are rarely a 15-second interaction.
They're at least a couple of minutes. Yeah.
Tell me you never got this call, or customer service not just got this call, Dr. Beckett. I want to speak to Dr. Beckett right now. Put him on the phone.
Yeah. Thank you for giving me that.
But Dr. Beckett, you raise a good point. Like these phone calls aren't 15 seconds. But then the question is, are Tops, Upper Deck, Panini, are they looking at those statistics? Are they looking to see how long they're taking phone calls for? Are they looking at how long someone's being on hold? Are they looking at someone that how long is a phone call taking? And that right there, looking at those statistics will help them optimize customer service and hopefully improve their customer service.
In a perfect world, I agree. Like they're making so much money now that I think that's not one of that's not one of their key performance indicators.
Yeah.
Well, while we all think we should and we deserve the customer service, we have to be realistic and understand that we may just not get it. So that now it's up to you to speak with your wallet. I see the comment from Sloth saying, shouldn't we get better than 2 hours on hold? Well, I mean, we think we should, but if we don't get it, why do we keep coming back? Because we're hobbyists, we're collectors, we're addicts in a way when it comes to this stuff. So I hear you, Sloth, but sometimes you got to take the bad with the good.
Yeah. You know, everyone complains about PSA, but their line stretches twice around the building at the National. Their submissions are endless, and so I've said that too, Jeremy, on my show as well. Like that, you speak with your wallet, and that's not getting done. So what do you expect these companies to really do? I know that sounds sort of like a cop out, but it's really the truth. And if we really want to see a difference, that's when a company notices it. Is in when their wallet notices it, and until then, it's going to be par for the course. Yeah, and like you said, you're going to either have to grin and bear it, or you're going to have to pivot and do what you want to do. Some people say, I'm not buying that product anymore. I'm not submitting, but not enough people, I guess, are doing that to change what's going on.
Well, and in that point, John, then the question becomes: is competition good? Right?
Yeah.
It like, okay, so the comic CGC, right? They're gonna launch their own grading soon. Is that a good thing? It could be, right? A well-known grading company in the industry is now going to be doing cards. That's great. But then are we going to see, PSA, BGS? Are we going to see improved quality from them? Are we going to see a worse product from them, right? Will we see prices go up? Will we see prices go down? Maybe not.
I don't think we'll see anything from PSA.
We may not see anything. Yeah.
CGC, because they don't need to. PSA doesn't need to, right? CGC is going to be a very slow scrape away at any market share that PSA has. I'm not saying there won't be some, but it's going to be very slow.
Yeah. They got to build their portfolio, right? So.
Yeah. Well,
All
thanks
right,
for having
guys.
me on, John.
Thanks, guys.
We really killed the customer service, but it's important. It's an important topic. So
yeah.
All right, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Come
you.
on anytime. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, guys.
All right. So last week, Brian Gray was on this program, and we talked about. I wasn't on the show, but they talked about fractional share market. You got companies like Collectible, Rally. I got a feeling those are not going to be the only two. I think it's going to, like everything else, there's going to be more people jumping in that fray. I'll be honest with you. Full disclosure, I've got about $100 as far as fractional shares in each of those two companies I just mentioned. I kind of did it not so much to be an advocate, or I did it so I could participate kind of on my show itself, kind of talk about the experience and what I see from being in the inside, so to speak, as a consumer rather than as someone who's not involved. Brian Gray wasn't really opposed to it. I don't want to speak for him. You can check that episode out on YouTube, but he had some concerns about the liquidity of your money if you wanted to get out of your fractional share, who's in charge of selling said card and the card aspect of it. He had a lot of questions. I'm pretty sure he said it won't be something he would partake in. I want to start with Dr. Jim first. This is you've seen a lot of things in this hobby. This is fairly new. It's not completely new. It's been in other forms, but now in the modern tech age where there's apps now where you can just open up your phone and do it in that form or fashion, and like 5 minutes. In 5 minutes, that's all it took me on each of those platforms to put $100 into a couple cards. Just kind of what your thoughts on it, like it, don't like it, thoughts, concerns.
Well, it's not about liking it or not liking it. It's a world, and this is, I won't say it was inevitable, but it's probably certainly an idea worth trying. And you're not going to know how successful it is in the first year necessarily, but they seem to be doing well. What a couple points. One is that these are businesses that are coming in, and they are regulated for the most part. And so
SEC regulated.
If you got to go to the fine print, but when you go to the fine print, you'll see there's a 90-day lockup period. There's selling windows, but all that stuff, again, they'll get in trouble if they don't abide by the rules that are imposed, either imposed on them or that they've chosen for these business entities. But okay, so that's the first part of it. The second part of it is that the businesses that I think Brian is getting at is that there's no assurance that these businesses will flourish. Maybe they need to. It's not a pyramid scheme, but I mean, they're going to keep adding in new products and taking in new money, and you shouldn't get into these things unless, again, the valuations of some of these things are so high that you need to ask yourself, which is kind of impossible to be honest with yourself, would I want to buy that card at that price? Because if I don't want to buy the card at that price, why would I want to buy 1% of that card at that price? Well, the answer is, and it's not like buying 1% of Apple or Microsoft, because they have dividends, they have earnings, they have perhaps some increase in value. But these cards, these glamour cards, to say I own 1 share of it or 10 shares or 1%, I guess that's some level of bragging rights, regardless of whether that underlying asset goes up or not. So
yeah, it's fun. I bought into the Mano, just, I don't know, 5 shares or whatever that was. And I jokingly posted on my Twitter, like, I'm the minority owner of this 53 Tops.
Not even jokingly. That's sort of interesting to me, and that's another way for people to enjoy the hobby. But can you imagine that you had, if you take it to absurdity, I could own a tiny, tiny piece of every card in the industry. I have every card, but I only have 1/1,000,000th of 1% of every card. And but then maybe that gives me the rights to show the image in some special way on my social media. I mean, who knows? But some of these cards, when they get into the millions, or they're one of ones, so it's a new day we're in the age of social sharing being almost a form of currency. Again, it's an idea who's come, and we'll see what kind of legs it has.
Yeah, Jeff, is this something you're interested? What are your, something you would consider?
I'm kind of torn in between. I guess a big question for me would be, through this whole fractional share market, would be, so we're buying in to have a piece or own a piece of a card or cards, whatever you get into. Who is it? The companies that are basically running this then that decide at some point if a card is going to sell? Does a card ever sell?
Yeah,
where do we go when we put our money in and we sit and watch it like a stock, maybe, like a retirement type deal? But where do we go, or how do we know? How is it going to be controlled? This company's controlling it. How are they going to decide at some point down the road, hey, are we selling this now? I guess that would be some of the questions I would have before I would just put any money into any fractional.
It's all spelled out. Every question you had has to be addressed before they even get their SEC permission, because they're very legitimate questions. And
right.
Everybody, I think people, though, to John's point, some people are not reading the fine print, and then they're buying something, and then they're asking the questions you're asking. The questions you're asking are outstanding, but I believe they're all addressed. And the other tricky thing is, because there are other entrants in this space, each one can do it a little bit differently.
Yeah. I believe I should know this, since I got $100 in each platform, but I believe the one plans on eventually selling the card like on an auction platform, and then I think the other is planning to just reopen the shares. So like if you bought the shares at $20 a piece, after that 90-day hold that Dr. Jim mentions, they may open it back up. All right, who didn't get in on the initial offering? If any of the existing shareholders want to sell, here's the level, and then you could get out. Someone new can buy your shares and get in if the perception is like it's worth it to do that now. Like it's worth it. You know, John paid $20 a share. I'm going to pay 28 and buy his. He's going to get out and make $8, you know, minus commissions. And then I'm going to own it. But it's like Dr. Jim says, it's a great point. You have to weigh out, like, is it worth the $28 now? Like, when is, you know, I think, and I might even be speaking to myself about myself here a little bit. I think people sort of do it to say, oh, yeah, I got a small piece of this. You know, it won't be something I would probably put, you know, I like I said, I got $100. I got $200 total. I wouldn't do $1,000. At $1,000, I would just go buy a real card to have in hand, like we all sometimes do. I just kind of did it. You know, I'm not going to lie, sort of on a whim, so I can kind of keep tabs, see how it progresses, kind of speak on my show, you know, when something of worthiness arises from it and talk to it, you know, on that level. But I probably, me personally, is not something I'm going to pour a lot of money into at that point. I think I speak for a lot of us here. You know, Dr. Jim's wearing his cards on his chest, but like there's nothing. There's cards behind me. There's cards. There's nothing like having a card in your hand or on your desk or in a display. You know, the 1%, if it's even that, of a 53 Topps mantle that I have is. I mean, at the end of the day, what are we really talking about? You know, not like having the actual card.
Hey, John, just again, the theme of this hour for Hobby Hotline, which I've really enjoyed being on with you and Jeff, and of course Jeremy. But basically, coming at this as an entrepreneur, I mean, you know, most people that are hobbyists are going to be thinking about potentially buying into this fractional ownership. But I think like the entrepreneur. So I think if I set up a company like this, how would I make money? So if I'm the fractional ownership, leadership, ownership, whatever, the people that own the company, I can make money first by by acquiring an asset into it and valuing it greater than what I paid. So I can make money right from the start by saying, I buy this card for $9,000 and put it up for $10,000. So I've already made something. Okay. Then I also can make money if later on the card goes up in value. And then I also can make money when anytime there's a transaction, I get a little percentage when there's trading. And so as a business model, this has been tried in other fields. And I think again, if there's enough activity and a dynamic element to it, which there is in sports cards, that things go up, but they go down. Let's see how they handle it goes down. Are they going to, can I short their portfolio? I don't think when you get absurd, when you make, when you get in trouble sometimes when you take a wonderful hobby and try to institutionalize it into a business.
Yeah. Well, we have Rich Klein. He's been waiting patiently. I'm gonna bring him in, see what he's got to say. Good morning, Rich. Welcome.
Good morning. Good morning. I was going to hop into the customer service thing because Jim, having been an entrepreneur, had to deal with it. But one of the things that switched when I was at Beckett was it started as customer service. Probably when the hobby softened a little, 96, 97, customer service actually became dealer sales, where it became much more of we'll reach out to people we know want to buy our magazines so we can sell more and also sell more books and eventually sell more OPGs and things like that. But, you know, I want to plug, and Jim can run it whenever he wants, but we taped a whole bunch of podcasts. And one of the podcasts we taped was about explosive growth in the hobby, where I sort of interviewed him about it. And we're not going to discuss that, but I'm an employee now of a company that's gone through explosive growth on 2 different occasions, 30 years apart. It's tough. I mean, because I know at ComC, we've thrown manpower into catching up on customer service. We're now throwing manpower into catching up on our backlog of processed cards so people can price them and sell them. We have to do what we have to do to get stuff out the door. And when you look at a place like Sports Slots, it's easy to have customer service on Sports Slots. Mike Summer talks about Sports Slots. Well, if I want to buy from Mike Summer on Sports Slots, I order from Mike Summer on Sports Slots. He gets the card to the post office. Yeah. That's as frictionless as you're going to have. If I order from ComC and I don't know the exact amount of people who have to handle every order, I'm not placing an order and I'm sending it and the next person gets it out. There's a process. And I talk about this with my car. My wife and mother-in-law use a local mechanic. If I drop my car off at the local mechanic, it's 1-2 people looking at the car doing the paperwork. If I take my car to the dealership, it's 13 people who handle the car along the way. So there are always processes. And I think that's what I want. That's one of the things to point out is that no matter what it is, there's a process. And hiring new people, good luck with that. I know from my experience working in the price guide area, we hired a lot of good people. We had a 50% success ratio, and most of those people actually knew a lot about the hobby.
Yeah, it's a great point. Not only are we, and I'm going to probably stick up for the companies a little bit here, which I don't try not to do all the time, but I try to be honest about it. You're dealing with probably, and I don't have figures or analytics in front of me, but I got to think that 2020 has probably been percentage-wise one of the biggest growth years in the sports card industry. And then you tack on that it happened in a year with the pandemic going on and people sheltered in place and quarantine and getting unfortunately coming down with the virus. I know there's companies that had employees come down with the virus, and it definitely makes navigating these waters all the more difficult when you add those two factors in, right? Great growth, but we can't do the same things in the same fashion that we would normally do it. And so, it's just, some might say, well, they're doing a pretty good job considering those circumstances. And then, as we know, we just talked about it, for 20, 25 minutes, there's people that aren't real enamored with the customer service level. So I always say, you can't please the whole room. I come from a coaching background, and I knew, if 80% of the parents liked me and 20% didn't, I probably was okay with those, numbers. But, you can't please everyone. But, obviously, I hope we all get past this in the pandemic. We get, whether it's a vaccine or the numbers slowly trickle down. Now we're in flu season, so add that wrinkle in as well. And I just hope when we're on the other side of this, these companies who can get back to full speed, full capacity, and we can see. Obviously, I think we all want the best customer service as consumers that we can get. I don't think that's it might be a tall order, but I don't think it's a lot to might not. I don't think it's a lot to ask for, but it might be a tall order. Rich.
Yes.
While you're here, we just talked about fractional shares. Any thoughts on that? What you think? You've been in this a long time as
if
well.
I told you I couldn't really care, would you believe me?
I would.
I mean, everybody has a right to do, and this is one of the arguments I have with my good friend Ben Wilson, who does a different podcast all the time. Ben tries to go on Twitter, well, you're an idiot if you do this, or you're an idiot. And I said, Ben, that's their money, their decision. If you want to do fractional shares, be my guest. If you don't want to do it, be my guest. It's your decision. It's your money. It's like owning a stock. And if I know I'm never going to own a T206 Wagner, but I know that I can own a piece of it for $100, I may say, you know what? Hey, I can say partial ownership of the most famous card in the hobby. It's worth doing. But, it doesn't affect my life in any way. So I don't really care. I mean, I hate to say it.
Well, Rich, you're at the other end of the market, and there's nothing wrong with it. I'm kind of fishing down there too some because it's more fun. But I can't tell you. I don't even. I'm a numbers guy, but I'm sure I've been asked whether I own a Wagner.
I've asked you that. We've talked about this.
People, and the just to close this off on the fractional ownership, could I respectfully say yes if I owned, $100 worth of a Wagner, that was in poor condition and valued at $1 million? I think I just keep my mouth shut and say no, I don't own one, because the next question is, can I see it? And I'll say,
well,
no.
I'll tell you, I had a funny story. Jim and I have a mutual friend in Dallas who owns one in the Dallas area, and he showed me his collection, and I said, you got to show me things I've never seen before, and he did. And at the end of it, he went to his safe and he pulled out the Wagner. And it's like, okay, I've seen 20 Wagners, 30 Wagners in my life. It wasn't a big deal. And I'm having dinner with my wife last night, and I told her how excited I was. I saw these college sets, from the last 5 years I've never seen before. I saw these team issues. And I say, oh, by the way, he owns a Wagner. At which point my wife promptly popped, whoa, he owns a Wagner? And that's like a throwaway line for you? I mean, my wife even understands what the Wagner is, which tells you how important that card is in the hobby, and that's where Jim's coming from on that.
Yeah, and there's a lot. There's my wife. I've said on my show, doesn't know anything about cards. Now she won't know the Wagner. She's not as good as your wife right there, Rich. But if I show her an '89 Upper Deck Griffey, she actually does know that. Obviously, we were both alive then, and she remembers. She's a baseball fan, so she knows Griffey Jr. And that, that's kind of always been a topic too in the hobby is, some of those cards like Wagner where people didn't see him play, where people don't care about him anymore. I think obviously we see what these auctions are going for. There's enough people who still care, obviously, that. But some of the newer folks coming in the hobby may, not either care or not interested. The old I never saw him play. There's no video. You can go back and there's video of Mano and DiMaggio and Ted Williams and so they still could be in the forefront if you wanted to do a little bit of that research. But all that pre-war era players, unfortunately, I think with the influx of the hobby, that's sort of kind of. We're losing touch with that. I love baseball history, so that's not going to happen with me per se. But I'm only one person in a great big ocean, and so I hope it can. We don't lose sight. Those are the guys that set us up for what we watch today. And I'm a past guy. I don't like to forget the past, and I hope there's enough people think like me to keep the past alive, so to speak.
Right. And I will say that if the Kyle Kendrick or whatever his name is, the Diamondbacks who owns the Wagner that Michael O'Keefe wrote the book about pops up for fractional ownership, that one I might be interested in because that is the most famous card in the hobby.
Again, we live in a digital world, but in the 20th century, this fractional concept would have been, and again, the logistics are difficult, but if you had 12 guys go together and say, we're going to buy a Wagner card, we're each going to put in 1/12, and we're each going to get to have it for 1 month. Then you'd basically have it. That's the thing of the two worlds. But what Jeff is bringing up is that if you can't touch it, you can't feel it, and somebody has it, it's somewhere out there. But for some people, that's enough because they can show the picture and say, I own a piece of this card. It's prohibitively expensive for me, but I can say that I own part of it. It's just like, how much mileage did Barry Halper get out of being a part owner of the Yankees? He's not a majority owner. George Steinbrenner called the shots, but he got to go to the ownership meetings, and he owned 5% tops. Now that's still 5% of a $1 billion asset, probably. But I'm just saying, there's a private ownership that can still extend to fractional.
And here's the other thing about Barry Halper owning part of the Yankees. it also gave him an entree to anybody who wondered if he was serious about collecting this memorabilia. Hey, I'm so serious. I have a stake in the Yankees.
Right.
Yeah. It's funny when Dr. Jim mentioned about if you buy a fractional share card, like we each get it for a month. I mean, my mind went to thinking about the Stanley Cup, where each member that winning team gets it for, I don't know, I think it's a week. I could be wrong. But if we were all on the Tampa Bay Lightning, we'd eat, I'd have the cup for a week, and then I'd give it to Jeff, and then he'd give it to Dr. Jim, and then, and you read crazy stories of what's been involved with that cup. That's a show in itself. But when Dr. Jim said that, I thought of the Stanley Cup, where we just all sort of take turns holding on to it.
Well,
but
Jim, if you've never talked about it on the podcast, I think you did buying trips in the 70s. You probably had similar type stories, and if you've never talked about it,
well, guys, I talked about the one. I think I did that maybe in the George Lyons tribute episode. But there are 12 guys we took on the Greater Boston before there was a Greater Boston show, and we had a couple 100,000 cards. I don't know what it was, and I was the guy that divided it up among 12. Now, it wasn't rotationally, but it was just, here are the 12 pieces. We all pooled our money, and we bought these various collections all across, and that was fun. And but that's not fractional ownership. That's a buying syndicate where each guy walks away with something. In the fractional, the way it's envisioned now, you don't walk away with anything except maybe a piece of paper.
Yeah. Or it's really an app form, so I'm sure you could print something out.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. Like I said, I'm doing it just for almost the conversation of it, to talk about my experiences with it. I don't expect to retire on it. Be nice, but I've done this a long time. I know how this goes, but. We'll see. What I'm curious to see, going back to fractional shares is how it's received. I mean, it's in its early forms right now. And Dr. Jim kind of commented on it. Like, is it going to expand? Is people going to get off that ship, so to speak? And then we'll see it sort of fade away. That's what I thought about grading many, many moons ago. And as I've said on my show many times, you can see I was way off the mark on that one. So it'll be interesting to see, as years go by, where that goes, or if it does.
Hey, John, in this day and age, social influencers are very powerful. But this fractional ownership concept is having a huge social influence, not just through the social media, but through mainstream media. A lot of the headlines, maybe half the headlines of the last 3 months of these record prices that have gotten a lot of attention and the purchasers of some of these expensive cards are the fractional ownership people. And so that's driving a lot of this enthusiasm and price increases in our category.
Yeah.
Because a couple of cards were bought by somebody that's going to put them, so the higher the price went, the more publicity value they had, the bigger the headline was that it was $1 million, then it was $1.8 million, it was 3.6 and 3.8, all this stuff. So,
yeah.
So it's, yeah.
So Ziggy says, can a manhole get you lucky with the ladies like the cup can? It depends on the manhole, Ziggy. I mean, not every manhole, but I'm sure there's a 52 tops might do the trick. But I see Jeremy. We're up against the clock, but I'm sure Jeremy has an important point, so I'm going to bring him on. Welcome back.
Thanks. I know it's at the end of the show, John, but I have a hot take on fractional, and it's that maybe it's not directed at any of us. Maybe it's not for collectors like us. Maybe it's for a whole new segment that investors, casual observers, and maybe it's a gateway for them to become collectors. So that's my hot take. It's not for the people watching this show. It's not for the people we see at the card shows. I'm not saying that they can't buy in, but I don't know that that's perhaps the primary market for fractional.
Yeah.
I think, Jeremy, you bring up a good point. It's an entree. It's just like the people who did sneakers. There was a sneaker show. I didn't get to go to it in Dallas last week. You know, if 5% of the people who do sneakers who went into cards stay into cards, it's a win, because then we've added 5% to our total. You know, as I've mentioned, 40 years ago, the word used to be coin dealers coming into the hobby. Well, coin dealers was a nasty word 40 years ago. Now I would say I welcome your, you know, John and I talked about this. I welcome your money. You know, we welcome your interest. If it brings you in and we end up keeping 5-10% of every new group that comes in, it's a win. So if we keep 5-10% of, as Jeremy says, the people, not us, who are interested in it, and they say, oh, wait a second, now I like owning something. Let me see if I can actually own a card. It's a win. And if we look at it at that level, then we can, as one of my articles said, stop, you know, thank you for complaining, but we can stop complaining on that one.
I'd love to find out the people that are buying the fractional shares. I don't know if we'll ever can get an accurate number, but I'd love to know the percentage of people who are doing that actually don't own any physical cards. Like I did it, but obviously I have a lot of physical cards. I just wonder how many that's their only foray into the hobby at this time. And then it'll be interesting to see, does that open the gateway? Hey, I don't really have, I own a part of this card, but I don't have it. I want to have some cards. And so it'll be interesting to see, does the hobby get more of an influx of new hobbyists from fractional shares, or is it going to be sort of you're on the outside looking in through the glass and not actually having any of those cards in hand?
Yeah, you did it for fun, John. You did it just to dabble and check it
Yeah.
out. You didn't do it to really invest or collect that way, and that's what I think a lot of us collectors would do.
Anybody want to see my CD collection or my DVD collection? No.
And I think a lot of us,
only if you put them like right here.
and I think what John did is something smart. It's like owning stock. It lets you monitor the market, monitor what's going on without a great deal of financial risk.
And you know, like I said, I put 100 on each of these platforms. So obviously you don't want to lose $200 or $10, but you know, it's like Jeremy said, it's kind of for fun, something I can talk about at different episodes of the show, where that program is at, where it's going. And it's a fun thing. It's the newest thing. There's going to be something else. Who knows what's next in the hobby? I think that's the fun of the hobby. It's just I mean, I've said on my show, if you not God forbid you go in a coma for a couple years and wake up, it's like a whole different world. I mean, you got to relearn some stuff, and I don't know if that's good or bad, or maybe a combination of both. But that's where the hobby is. And I've been, me and Jeremy the same age, and I'm going to speak to him later. He's my guest on episode 99. It sounds appropriate as well with the number with Gretzky. But I remember a time in the hobby where it wasn't a lot of changes. I mean, there's always changes, but not to the level we're seeing now. Every couple months there's something new going on, and it's exciting. But I think for some people, maybe new to the hobby, it might also be a little bit scary or intimidating as well.
Well, let's do the parallel. Project 2020 brought a lot of art fans into the hobby, or we hope it brought art fans into the hobby that followed the artists. Again, if 5 or 10% of them stick, and I mean, a lot of sets have drawings in them. More, I mean, trust me, I see more cards with drawings in them than I ever thought. When I look at the ComC database, there's a lot of art cards out there, not just Perez Steel that we consider, but a lot of art cards. If you collect art cards, there's a huge world for you in the hobby. And if Project 2020 and the people who got that just want to do art cards, or sketch cards, they've got a ton of stuff to choose from. So again, if 5 or 10% stick who did 2020 because they followed the artist, that's another win for us.
Agree.
Yep. All right. Well, guys, we went a little over time, but man, we had some great conversation. We kind of covered some ground: customer service, fractional shares, the national. I appreciate everyone being on, those calling in as well. Thank you, as always. we're live every Saturday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 Central, 9 Mountain, 8 Pacific. I think I covered all my time zones there. But gentlemen, thank you. As always, appreciate your insight, your candidness, and I think we really touched a lot of different subjects, especially current events. So have a great weekend.
Thanks for having me.
Everybody.